Week 12 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few running backs I looked at off the wire this week. The first back, Cam Akers of the Minnesota Vikings. Akers, the last couple of weeks, he's definitely getting a good workload in this Viking offense. Obviously, Aaron Jones, he's still healthy, and he's played well for the majority of the season. But Cam Akers, like I said, he's starting to eat into the workload a little bit for this Minnesota Viking team. Week 9 versus the Colts, 6 carries, 46 yards, 2 catches, 7 yards. Week 10 at Jacksonville, 13 carries, 38 yards, a catch, 9 yards. And Week 11 at Tennessee, 10 carries, 25 yards, 2 catches, 11 yards, and a receiving touchdown, where he vultured, obviously, Aaron Jones later on in that ball game. So Week 12, a decent matchup at the Bears, give up the 17th most fantasy points to running backs on the season. And right now, Cam Akers, he's definitely a valuable running back, I believe, for owners to go out there and get, because Jones does go down with injury. He's one of the better handcuffs this season, I believe, and he's available in 83% of fantasy leagues. Back Gus Edwards of the Los Angeles Chargers. I know Gus Edwards, he's in that backup role for this Los Angeles Charger team as well, but he did have 6 carries, but a lot of early carries in that ball game. It was until J.K. Dobbins got going, and he had 2 touchdowns, including the game-winning touchdown. So obviously J.K. Dobbins, the lead back for this Los Angeles Chargers team. And even at the goal line, we saw Hassan Haskins stuffed at the goal line, and then J.K. Dobbins on a 4th down play early in that game jumped over the top and found the end zone. So Gus Edwards, nothing more than a backup, short yardage, and maybe goal line at times. But like I said, Haskins, he got the 2 goal line touches, got stuffed, and then Dobbins punched it in. So right now, if you need a backup and a handcuff running back, Gus Edwards is one of those other backs this week that's a handcuff for fantasy owners, and someone that's available right now in 72% of fantasy leagues. The next back's Dre Benson, Arizona Cardinals. So Dre Benson, he was a nice rookie coming into the season for this Arizona Cardinal team, and a lot of people took him in fantasy drafts. But obviously, he didn't get a lot of work until recently, when Week 9 and Week 10, he got some work and he put up some fantasy points. So right now, available in 80% of fantasy leagues. Coming off a bye week, I say this a lot of rookies, they get into the playbook more, they get more playing time. In the last 2 weeks before the bye, Week 9 versus the Bears, 8 carries, 37 yards, a touchdown, a catch, 18 yards. And Week 10 versus the New York Jets, 10 carries, 62 yards, 2 catches, 25 yards. I know it was a blowout victory versus the New York Jets in Week 10 for this Arizona Cardinal team. But like I said, James Conner, he's been injury prone throughout his NFL career, and it wouldn't be surprising to me if something pops up sooner than later, and then Dre Benson will come in and be that starting running back possibly. But even as a backup, he's carved out a decent role of late, and he's put up some numbers, and he's available in 80% of fantasy leagues, in a decent matchup coming up here in Week 12 with the Seahawks. I give up the 10th most fantasy points to backs on the season. Dre Benson, definitely a running back I would add this week. Back Rohan Johnson of the Chicago Bears. He's been the goal line back the majority of the season for the Chicago Bear team. He is Rohan Johnson, and we saw him once again in Week 11 where he vultured DeAndre Swift in that game. So his numbers haven't been great, but someone who could, get into the end zone and get 10, 12 touches per game. That's been the role for the most part this season for Rohan Johnson. And he's on a Bear offense that's been up and down as well. So I know Week 12 is a tough matchup, but Johnson in Week 11 in a tough matchup versus the Packers. 10 carries, 33 yards, like I said, had the goal line touchdown and a catch for 8 yards. So Johnson, the backup. Khalil Herbert got traded a few weeks ago at the NFL trade deadline to the Cincinnati Bengals. And if Swift went down, he's going to step in, obviously, to a big workload. So right now that he's locked in, he's the goal line back, and he's getting a decent amount of touches this season. I think Rohan Johnson is a decent add this week. In the final running back, Amir Abdullah, Las Vegas Raiders. So Abdullah, he might get an expanded role in next week's ball game. We saw him find the end zone in Week 11 is Abdullah. But the thing is, there's nothing going on in this backfield for Vegas. Right now, Madison, he left the game, and Zamir White, he was banged up as well and left the game for this Vegas Raider team. So the last few weeks for Amir Abdullah, he's more of a receiving back than in between the tackles. Week 8 versus Chiefs, a carry, 2 yards, a catch, 9 yards. Week 9 at Cincinnati, in that game, 4 carries, 12 yards, 3 catches, 14 yards. In Week 11 at Miami, like I said, a carry, 1 yard, 3 catches, 16 yards, and a touchdown. So if Madison can't go, it was Zamir White in this game versus Denver. Even though it's a very tough matchup, one of the best defenses in the league, Amir Abdullah, he'll get more work in between the tackles, and we know he's already locked in for the most part. He's at passing downs back. So right now, if you need a running back in a deep dive in deeper leagues, Amir Abdullah is out there in 99% of fantasy leagues. That's a few running backs I looked at off the wire for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.